Wake up between 7 and 8 in the morning. Listen to the birds for 5-10 minutes. Check my messages. Drink water. Have oatmeal with peanut butter, fruit, and coffee for breakfast. This is the morning routine I take with me wherever I go. If I looked into a crystal ball and saw myself as an old woman doing the same morning routine 40 years from now, I'd be perfectly content, with maybe the exception of waking up even earlier. The same goes for my evening routine. A raw honey face mask, followed by moisturizer. A drop of lavender essential oil behind my ears. Lotion on my hands, elbows, and feet. At least 30 minutes of reading, sometimes 2 hours. I like to write before bed, but not for too long, since it makes my mind too alert. These little things, repeated, are the heartbeat of my travels. Routine, in all its unromantic glory, become an anchor in the swirling storm of new places. They might seem mundane compared to the perceived thrills of travel, but on the long road, the body remembers the comfort of consistency, and the mind craves the solace of familiar rhythms. After finishing my 14-month journey through Latin America, Mexican cuisine wins first place for my palate. It's a common misconception that Latin American cuisine is spicy. Mexico is one of the few countries in the region that fulfills this assumption. My housemates and I often visited different taco stands in the city. One was a mechanic's garage during the day and turned into a taco stand in the evening. During my first week, I couldn't read anything on the menu, so I decided to get what everyone else ordered. In less than a month, tacos and horchata were becoming as ubiquitous to me as burgers and fries. The concept of the taco is ingenious. Different parts of the animal, from tongue to cheek, to ribs to intestines, with the tortilla as a vehicle. The salsa and lime helped cut the fattiness of the meat and balance the flavors. Birria and suadero tacos were my favorites. Sometimes, when presented with a row of colorful salsas, I'd naively assume the red one was the most spicy and the green one was the least spicy, only to taste them and discover it was the reverse. Then, at a different restaurant with the same array of salsas, the green one would be the mildest and the yellow one would be the spiciest. To my surprise, cheese was rarely used as a taco ingredient. The few times I had tacos in the United States always involved shredded cheese and the option of a hard shell taco, which I found ridiculous and luckily was non-existent in Mexico. I rarely went to Mexican restaurants while living in the United States. After living in Mexico City for 6 months, I doubt I ever will. One of my favorite dishes was aguachile, a cold dish made of raw shrimp marinated in peppers and lime juice, served with red onions and cucumbers, the perfect lunch on a hot day. The only two foods I didn't like were chilaquiles and mole. I've never liked chips much, which was a key ingredient in chilaquiles. Whenever my friends and I went out for breakfast, I ordered enchiladas instead. I tried so hard to like mole, which was a thick, dark sauce made from chilies, spices, and sometimes chocolate. There are several different kinds, and I tried many, but it was too much of an acquired taste for me. My health took an unfortunate dip after eating tripe tacos. They didn't affect my stomach the first time I had them with my friends. I wasn't so lucky on my second time. I had a fever, stomach cramps, and a week of diarrhea before my housemate decided it was time for me to see a doctor and take some antibiotics. When I told the doctor I had tripe tacos from a street vendor, he closed his eyes, shook his head slowly, and said, "Very, very bad." He prescribed antibiotics, prebiotics, and anti-inflammatory medicine for my intestines. As delicious as those tripe tacos were, I will not be eating them again. In the whirlwind of Mexico City's culinary delights, tempting you at every corner, it's easy to forget the quiet hero of your own kitchen. I usually made a simple stir-fry of broccoli with garlic, sautéed spinach, or zucchini with mushrooms, and had them with brown rice and fish. I did most of my shopping at the farmer's market because I love the open market experience, but many of my housemates ordered their groceries online and recommended some delivery apps. Making a simple, wholesome meal is counterintuitive while traveling. We want to participate in the global feast and be seduced by bold flavors of the unfamiliar. It's comical how staying home to cook a pot of rice and lentils becomes an act of rebellion. Exercise is equally a challenge while traveling. Someone left a yoga mat in my house before moving out, and I claimed it for my daily yoga sessions. I've been doing yoga for over 10 years. I did group classes in New York City and started using an app after I moved to Vietnam. I met some fellow travelers who enjoy trying new yoga studios from country to country, but I personally prefer my yoga app because it provides more consistency. Someday, when I have a permanent address, I'll likely switch back to in-person yoga studios, especially to help me master the more advanced poses. I also packed a set of resistance bands, which I highly recommend since they're compact and lightweight. I practice yoga Monday through Friday. On Saturdays and Sundays, I took salsa and bachata group classes in the park, which were an hour long each. There were 3 levels, and it took me about 1 month to reach level 3. It's also a great way to make new friends. Of course, don't underestimate the power of a nice long walk. Allow your explorations to be your exercise. I lived in a shared house with 9 other people during my time in Mexico City. With 10 people living under one roof, most would assume it was a beehive of clashing schedules. The reality was quite the opposite. Our shared space was a quiet constellation of independent lives, all chasing their own commitments. Some housemates went to the office or a cafe, while others worked remotely in their rooms. There'd be brief encounters in the kitchen and passing hellos and goodbyes in the living room as we went about our day. Of course, we planned many social events. Taco Tuesdays, Wine Wednesdays. We threw quite a few parties as well, usually ending no earlier than 4 a.m. For me, it was like a delayed university experience. I attended an arts and design school in New York City that had virtually no campus life. I lived alone in an apartment, I went to class and did my assignments and explored the city mostly in solitude. Life is funny. I thought I missed the boat on the American college experience and unexpectedly got a taste of it after entering my 30s. At one house party, I met Katie, an American woman from Philadelphia who used to work as a COO in Switzerland and was now enjoying a few years off. She lived in Zurich for several years and had a Swiss pension. After quitting her job, she decided to use the pension money to buy breast implants. I was in disbelief and asked her why. She replied between sips of her michelada that she always felt like clothing never fit her properly. Dresses were always too roomy on top or too tight on the bottom. She loved her new breasts and had no regrets. Unfortunately, her savings were running low and she was soon returning to the United States to find a job. At another party, I met a beautiful Venezuelan woman named Sofia, who was in the process of getting her Mexican citizenship. She'd been studying for a month. Some of the questions asked her about Aztec gods and the name of the coral reef off the Mexican coast. Facts that Mexican native citizens probably didn't know. I recalled taking my citizenship test for the United States years ago, which was shockingly easy. She was dating an extraordinarily tall and muscular Belgian man who had a disfigured face. He was diagnosed with mouth cancer a few years ago and had to have half his jaw removed. He said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. I had a long conversation with an American named Byron who was high on LSD. He confessed he had the tendency of falling in love and entering into relationships too quickly. He thought he met his soulmate last year at Burning Man. She was a Venezuelan yoga teacher living in Miami. Byron even considered relocating there after swearing up and down he'd never live in the United States. The romance quickly ended a few months later after she said she wasn't ready for a relationship. Before that, Byron lived with a Vietnamese girl in Thailand. He loved her, but was annoyed that she expected him to pay all living expenses while she didn't work at all. Even though the cost of living in Thailand was cheap, Byron couldn't see a future with a girl who had no drive for a career of her own. He recently went out with a Mexican girl who explicitly stated she wanted kids soon, and if she accidentally got pregnant, she was having the baby. He was too paranoid to sleep with her after that. Sometimes I'd go on little excursions in the city on my own. I visited the Palace of Fine Arts to see one of Diego Rivera's murals. He might have been a terrible husband, but he was a phenomenal muralist. Once I went to the neighborhood of Coyoacán to visit the Leon Trotsky house. The simple furnishings and modest size spoke volumes, defying the stereotype of great minds requiring grand surroundings. I skipped Frida Kahlo's house because tickets were expensive and needed to be purchased in advance. One weekend, my housemates and I took a day trip to Cuernavaca to swim in one of its natural rivers. A word of advice to fellow travelers: if you want to know where to go, ask the locals where they go. It's more effective than searching online for Mexico City's top 10 weekend getaways. You may even get some helpful hints on where to stop for food. I recently finished reading I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. She recounts a harrowing childhood battling racism and trauma in the segregated South. Despite abuse and hardship, she finds solace in words and her own imagination, ultimately learning to sing her own song of freedom and self-discovery. I hope I can share my stories and inspire others in my own way.